Hello again, viewers. I'm Lee Earl, and I'm sitting now in a hotel room at the world famous, perhaps I should say notorious, Mindvention. One of the beauties of going to Mindvention is I am able to capture the experts from all around the world, and one of them today has consented to be one of the stars of mentalism. And he's a fellow who I don't know well, except I do through his performance, through his expertise, through his newsletters, which he sends to his corporate clients and those who are interested. And it is always a pleasure opening up the email and seeing that newsletter from Mr. Paul Draper. Good morning, Paul.
Hey, good morning. I'm terrified by the text that you just used. You people that you have captured, but they consented. So I've consented to capture. Okay, so here we are.
Here we are. Paul, give folks a brief sketch of what you're doing now,
right,
and how you were attracted to mentalism.
Sure. So I'm a full-time corporate mentalist these days. Now, I say corporate mentalist, but I also perform for colleges and county fairs. I mean, when you're a working professional making your full-time living at this, you do what you do. I'm here in Las Vegas today at Mindvention. Last night I performed a corporate buyout at the MGM, and so I missed the evening show, which is always sad because, you know, Mindvention is the greatest mentalists in the world coming together in one room to put on the most terrible shows ever, because we are trying to deal with the how to perform for other mentalists, which is quite an interesting world.
Fortunately, we're among friends.
Right. Fortunately, we're among friends. The bearded and long-haired men in black convention. I love doing this. I was originally, as a young boy, I think most children around age 7 or 8 become interested in magic. It's part of the way our brain works as we transition from a place where everything is magic to suddenly understanding the difference between what is a trick and what is and isn't magic. And that happens developmentally about 7 or 8 years old. And so most people get into magic at that point as they realize, oh wait, I can have this external effect on other people. My transition into mentalism started with Carl Fulvis's book, Self-Working Mental Magic, that my uncle picked up for me at Disneyland, at the Disneyland Magic Shop. Years later, when Gino Minari bought that magic shop,
yes,
that wooden rack that the Carl Fulvis books used to be on now was covered in puppets. And I called him and said, Gino, please, when I was a boy, this had the Fulvis books. And before I left the park, it was filled with the Fulvis books again and still is to this day. Good. Years later, here in Vegas on a vacation with family at age 16, a magic dealer named Gil Martinez convinced me to buy Corinda's 13 Steps to Mentalism, because he showed me a center tear and said, if you buy this book, I'll teach you how to do this and everything, and you'll have everything else in there as well. Fabulous. But the real transition was when I moved to Vegas. And I was teaching at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and I auditioned for a variety show at a little casino that isn't here anymore called the Bourbon Street. But Shudogawa and Murray and a lot of famous magicians were in this show. We weren't famous then. And they came out, the producer came out and said, no more magicians. We have all the magicians we need. If you're in line to audition, you're a magician, please go home. And I turned to my buddy who was in line and said, what do we do? And we talked about what it is we were going to audition with, and I said, you're not a magician, you are an escape artist, and I'm a mentalist. And we were both booked in the show, even though they didn't want any more magicians. The escape artist and the mentalist made it into the lineup of the show, and that was my first real foray into being a full-time mentalist. And
what's the lesson we are to draw from that?
Yeah, I mean, the lesson is having unique abilities, being something different or unusual or desirable. It made all the difference in the world for me. I mean, that was my opening opportunity to be in a major show in Las Vegas.
Would it be safe to say that at the time, magicians were a commodity to be bought and sold a dime a dozen? We got them lined up outside.
Right.
Whereas, and you look at that time in the yellow pages between magnets and magazines, and you find magicians.
Sure.
But there was no entry for mentalists.
Right.
We were unique.
Right. And even today, even though there's a growing population of mentalists, still, Magic Live has 1,600 people come, and Mindvention has 80 to 100.
Yes.
And so there is something very unique about an individual who can succeed in this art.
So from that point, from your introduction, you knew intellectually that magic was different from mentalism.
Right.
How different?
Great question, how magic and mentalism are different. Magic is about all performance, from theater to magic to juggling, is about the audience's experience of cause and effect, and surprise. This is the difference to me. I'm not saying that this is the difference, but this is my experience.
We need your perceptions.
In magic, the audience wants to see something visually delightful. They want to see something visually interesting. It's one step away from being a juggler. Mentalism is closer in its origin to religion. And as an individual who's a trained cognitive anthropologist, I want to talk to that for just a moment. Mm-hmm. We are in the dream fulfillment business. Magicians, the dream that they fulfill is, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could make a woman levitate? Wouldn't it be wonderful if I could bring someone back from the dead? A seance worker also is in the business of, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could bring someone back from the dead?
At least a voice.
Right, but instead of the body, they're interested in the mind.
Yes.
And in mentalism, we are interested, instead of fulfilling the physical desires of flying and levitating and vanishing and reappearing, we're interested in fulfilling the desires of the mind. Wouldn't it be amazing if I could read others' thoughts, if I could move things with my thoughts, if I could know things about the future? So magic and mentalism, both sides, is in the dream fulfillment camp. But is your dream about some corporeal body, or is your dream about some essence and spirit? The other big difference is, no one goes to a magic show, very few go to a magic show and say, my whole life I've known there were people that could fly, and look, I found one. But many people come to a mentalism show and say, my whole life I knew that there were people that had exceptional abilities, and look, I found one.
You've just made a major point, and that is that there is no market for a fake mind reader. Nobody says, I want to pretend to read your mind and get good answers.
Right.
Instead, we are validating their fantasies.
Right. No one goes to Peter Pan and wants Mary Martin, who's playing Peter Pan, to say, look, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl, and I'm not flying, that's a wire. And Tinkerbell is just a spotlight, she's already dead, your clapping means nothing, right?
Yes.
We want, during that theatrical experience, I believe, to have an experience of truth. And when we go to theater, the experience of theater should be, at least for that moment, at least for the moment of the theater, it should be an experience of truth.
And we must, in order to get that experience, in the theatrical term, suspend our disbelief.
Right. Both our audiences and our own. I mean, one of the keys to the Stanislavski system, or what we call in America the method, based on Meisner and others, is that we as the participant, we as the mentalist, should have some experience, emotional experience connected to what it is we're doing.
Oh, let's talk another hot button of
Sure.
mine. Mentalism allows us to touch our audience in ways that you could never do with magic.
Right.
How do you make your pieces have more emotional content without going over the top Vegas schlocky?
Sure. First, to be Vegas schlocky, we have to do jazz hands. But yes, I feel, right, I thought deeply about what kind of a mind reader do I want to be. What would it be like if I was an individual who could read minds? And and I thought about other characters who read minds. Santa Claus is a mind reader. He knows if you're sleeping, he knows if you're awake, he knows if you've been good or bad, so be good for, right. So Santa Claus is a mind reader, he's a mentalist. He has a big beard and a belly, he fits in, he wears a costume, right? Mm-hmm. And he also has magical powers. God, the ideal of God, is a mind reader. Mm-hmm. God knows our thoughts and prayers, knows and answers our prayers, right? I'm not saying we're as mentalist gods, but who are the characters who are mind readers? And if I was a mind reader, would I, like some mind readers out there, be annoyed at that everyone is so bland and boring and consistent, and my God, I wish I could find someone new and unusual? That there are some mind readers that's their take.
Yes, I have these powers. You don't. You may applaud now.
Right, you may applaud now. Or would I say, I have this deep, profound empathy for people, and I now love them in some deep and profound way because I know their experience. And as someone who understands the experience of being a friend, of being a parent, of being, we know that when we have shared experience with someone, we love them more. When we know their humanity, we love them more. Mm-hmm. So to me, the key to being a mentalist, so much about being a mentalist, is about loving an individual, is about having love for that person, at least in that moment that's on stage. If that's difficult to do, which I understand, I often will look at individuals on stage and try and find things about them that remind me of other people I care about and love, right? If there's somebody from Iran, then they remind me of my dearest and closest friend Shaheen and his family, mm-hmm. and I give them the kindness that I would give if this individual was a member of that family. If there's someone from St. Louis, then they're an individual who reminds me of my dear sweetheart who's also she's from St. Louis, right? And so I want to find those emotional connections where I am mishbuka, I am family with everybody on stage.
In fact, I think you are attempting to generate a real emotive connection.
Right.
Much as when I read palms, I encourage myself to fall in love for that moment with the lady whose hand I'm holding. They can tell.
They can tell, absolutely.
So how do you avoid then, or is it not a problem? You mentioned the various mind readers in our world experience, and you mentioned God. How do you keep yourself, or is it necessary to, keep your distance from this, but only God has those powers?
Right, good question. I think it's important at all stages of our art to avoid being burned alive, right? There are magicians, right? There are magicians even in our time,
yes.
Even in the last few years, who have been lit on fire by people, right?
Yes.
And so I think there are important things to say and do, and times and places to say and do them, to give the statement of, I am not a witch, this is a show, don't burn me.
Yes.
One big one for me is, at the start of my show, I talk about the fact that I was a university professor, and everything that I do, I've learned from observing others and recreating it. I say all of us have exceptional abilities, that my grandfather taught the Taylor Totem of Creativity and Multiple Talents in Children. He was the head of educational psychology at the University of Utah. Some people have exceptional talents here and there, and everyone has talents. And also at the end of my show, I perform the linking rings while singing Pure Imagination from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And if somebody after the show comes to me and says, do you really have these powers? Can you talk to my dead relative? If after the show they want the show to continue off the proscenium, away from the stage and off the footlights, they want the show to continue, I say to them, just like how I performed the great classic magic trick, the linking rings, with that song Pure Imagination, This show was a journey of our imagination. It was a theatrical experience. I am so happy you enjoyed the show.
Okay.
So
it's a good take, and it fits your overall persona, your look,
Right.
The works. I wish I had your voice.
Yeah,
It is, and I heard you perform that just last night, and I must say, this hardened bunch of been there, done that mentalists were absolutely silent and focused on you as you worked, and that to me says much more than almost anything else.
And I love that we had Jack Kent Tiller, the actual music producer on the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. He's a mentalist, and he was sitting there in the audience. And,
Yes.
And a man that's made a huge difference in the music world. Won Emmys and never won a Tony, but he won an Emmy, a Grammy, and an Academy Award.
We have some very talented individuals among our profession. How do you choose your material? What criteria do you use?
So this is different for everyone. My choices are twofold. One, what fits with my character's skills, abilities, persona, and show, right? And the other is now. Of course, the overarching is the experience on the audience. Do I think that this is going to create a positive experience for the audience? I think to back up off of that a minute. Too often when I see somebody their show seems to be a hodgepodge of things that fooled them that they happen to be able to afford. And so
that's cold.
So many magic shows these are the things that fooled me that I can afford. And I'm going to build a show full of the things that fooled me that I can afford. And
with no further thought than that.
No further thought than that. And that's a pretty rough show. So first and foremost, we have to have a concept of what we want the show to be, what experience we want the audience to have. Secondarily, once you've picked that you're doing Oklahoma, right, you then pick who are the cast members and their skills. So is this song going to fit my skill ability? Can I hit all the notes, right? In this mentalism piece, does it fit my skills, my abilities? Do I hit all those notes, right? And then secondarily, is my personal ease of experience. And this is something that I take very seriously, though may not be best for you. I make a real distinction in my show that I want an ease of experience for travel, because I'm performing all over the world, and I'm performing hundreds of shows a year, and sometimes multiple shows in one day, in multiple cities in one day, a morning show in one city and an evening show in another city. This December, there are less days in the month than I have shows booked.
Right.
And so it's important to me that I have a show that fits in a carry-on bag, and that's everything I need. Now, there is an argument for, if we are charging thousands of dollars for our show, that we should have as much scenic, costume, and theatrical ability as at least a junior high theater production. But then again, top of the line corporate keynote speakers, comedians. I mean, look at a stand-up comedian. They have a stool and a bottle of water and a microphone on a stand. That is their set, they are filling huge arenas.
Yes.
As a mentalist, we have access to, now a comedian just has words.
Yes.
Right. An actor has words and other cast members. A musical theater actor has words, other cast members, dance and song and props. Right. Magician has all of that plus magic.
Yes.
Right. A mentalist has all of that plus magic and the ability to touch people's minds and hearts. And so we should be using as many of these skills and tools as are available to us, but we also need to live a life. My original show my first mentalism show I put together, I had a throne chair and a painting and a Persian rug and tables and all of this. And then I spoke to Hal Holbrook, who tours with Mark Twain tonight. Yes. He also uses these same set pieces, but he said, Venues have them.
Yes.
Venues have them. Just tell them what you need, and they will set your stage. You don't need to. I bought a Jaguar station wagon just so I could carry all these props with me.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was driving across the country, sometimes 16 hours to a gig, so I could have my chair and my podium. But instead, I've built a set that uses things that venues have, that universities have, that corporate venues have, that casinos have. So I can have my beautiful set, but I just have to show up with my bag.
Sure.
When I choose the individual effects, and I know we're a long way away from that initial question,
Yeah.
but when I choose the individual effects, I am particularly interested in the things that set me apart from other variety entertainers. And where much of magic can be performed in front of a mirror, or can be performed in front of a house with no audience in it,
Yes.
and the show will be identical to what would be performed if it was full of an audience.
Yes.
And I love magic. Don't get me wrong.
Agreed.
I love magic. Mentalism requires that interactivity and participation, and the primary reason people hire me is because they're interested in an immersive, interactive experience where as many people as possible are able to get up on stage and have fun.
That sounds like an elevator pitch.
Right? That is the elevator.
Well, you're echoing so many of the things that I try to get across from my lecture.
Right. Who would have thought how much I read of your material before I started, right?
I don't know.
Right.
But I'm glad to hear it again.
Lots.
But I am particularly fascinated when you mentioned about choosing your material. You thought of the audience and the moment first.
Right.
And now, do you have a theatrical background?
Yes. Yeah, big. I mean, my undergraduate degree was in cultural anthropology, and my minor was in broadcast journalism, but I had more credit hours in musical theater than I did in my major and minor combined.
Okay.
I was in Phantom of the Opera, the production that sat down here in Las Vegas. I toured with different theatrical Broadway shows, and so yes, I have quite an extensive theater history. But I gave that so I had a career in musical theater, then I had a career as an academic, and then I have a career as a mentalist, and so these have been sort of the three big journeys of my life.
But you brought the ethic of theater with you. You
Right.
understand the privilege of the platform.
Right, absolutely.
Not just getting up there and showing off, but giving people a moment that they will remember until the very last instant they draw breath.
This is something that I feel bad about saying, but all of us in magic and mentalism, we're broken little 8-year-olds who want to have power and want people to like us. And most people get over that by age 10 or 12. They learn to play football, or they learn to ride horses, or go fishing, or find some other venue. Those of us that stay in this profession, it's because we still have some of that. And when we can get over that and instead say, how can I use this skill to empower, enlighten, and delight other broken people, right? How can I help other hurting people in the world by bringing them a moment of escape and joy and pleasure? Well, that's when we have the ability to be a professional.
Yes. I will share a secret with you and now our audience.
Yeah.
The Book of Fears, the Book of Lists has a list of fears.
Right.
And the greatest fear above falling, dying, drowning, burning is getting up in front of an audience, and especially of your peers. You and I would rather be up there than anyone else, and sometimes we don't understand that other people find that a terrible, fearsome thing to contemplate. My very first experience on stage, I was not a bandit. I didn't have a father. Actually, I had 4 fathers.
Right.
None of whom were particularly interested in the kid.
Right, yeah.
And so I didn't have a lot of that stuff growing up. The first time I felt actually loved was on the stage.
Well,
From that moment, I was hooked. Is there a similar parallel?
I certainly, my mother was married multiple times to multiple guys. I was in a big way raised by my grandmother, who was born in 1919. She just passed away last year on my birthday, on Halloween. She was 97.
Wow.
I was performing at the Magic Castle when she passed. And on my birthday. And I was raised by my mother, most of my life a single mother, and my uncle, and that was my family. And like you said, men that came and went. And I was a Jew growing up in Utah, right?
That's a little burden there as well.
I was the one, right? And they had a parade when I left. But it's so I was certainly an outsider, an outcast. Other kids weren't allowed to give me Valentine's cards or invite me to dances and things. But when I was on stage, like you said, in junior high productions or grade school choir or this, suddenly there is a love, an embrace of the audience, and there's also a embrace of the community of actors on stage. That's something I miss terribly in mentalism.
Yes.
Is that mentalism is a lone art. We don't tend, unless you're a two-person mind reading act, which I've worked with and worked on. Doing again on December 9th, the two-person mind reading act. But except for that, or performing in the Pallor at the Magic Castle, which I do with Scott Land, the marionettist, or Christian Kajkul, the bizarrist, most of the time we are traveling alone, in hotels alone, on stage alone. And so we have to turn the audience into our chorus. We have to turn audience participants, not just volunteers, but participants, into our cast. They become our friends. They become our community. They become core essential parts of the show.
Indeed. What's the most often overlooked thing among other performers, no names, but when working with participants from the audience?
The most overlooked thing, I think, is turning people into props. I have no interest in helping a magician or a mentalist who simply is using people as props. And we can often tell someone who objectifies others by their use of phrases like, "Would you do me a favor and? Would you help me and?" And using these phrases over and over, not looking at the person, not caring about their name, not remembering their name.
Yeah, I need you to.
I need you to
I
do
want
this.
you to.
Right, I want you to. I need you to. And just having them fill in for a table.
Yes.
Never having any connection, never having any emotional experience, never giving them a moment to shine. If we have so much fear that this audience, one of those lines of, I just checked with the stage manager, you don't have any more lines in the show. Oh boy. I just, unless that person is really just an out of control drunkard, don't use these things. Don't use these attacks on the audience. I think that the biggest flaw of most mentalists in using participants is not creating a space for that participant to be a person and to shine on stage.
Agreed. I also know that you have adopted something I've highly recommended for years. These people ain't spectators. How nice they get to watch.
Right.
Without them, we have no show.
Right. Right.
So we begin by honoring them, by elevating their status, adding an extra syllable,
right,
and taking it from there. Because many people fear being on the platform, what is your process for selecting a person, inviting the person to the platform? I think I'm leading the witness, and then making them comfortable.
Right, good question. Joshua Jade just came out with some great research that he presented at Magic Live, where he worked with a university in New Jersey, I believe, and they interviewed hundreds of participants about their experience with magic and with magicians. One thing I found particularly interesting in his research is something that I've believed all along, which is that there are people who desperately want to help magicians, and there are people who desperately don't want to help magicians. And if somebody, the classic advice in magic is, if that person doesn't come up, you have to force them to come up or everyone else will say no. Boy, I gotta tell you, if someone doesn't want to come up, I don't want to force them to do anything, because there are people in the audience who so desperately do want to come up. There's another classic adage in Magic and Mentalism, which is, don't let people choose themselves, because you will get the children and the drunks and the fools. I completely disagree with that. As someone with a background also in hypnosis, I want some of those individuals up on stage who are passionate and excited and want to be there. And so there are many times in my show, where I say to the audience, I need 5 people up here on stage. Choose yourselves, the first 5 to come up here. You are the ones. And I take whoever wants to come up, because I can handle those individuals. If someone's crazy or wild, the audience will prune them for me. I mean, they will take care of that. We are building a society where it's not me against them or against us. They don't hate me. They don't want to see me fail. Everyone wants to see me succeed, because I want to see them succeed. This is like a teacher in a classroom, a beloved teacher, not a punishing, hated teacher.
Right.
When I choose people who are engaged, who want to come up, who look like they're having fun. I also build effects into my show that allow people to help from their seats. I say, is there anybody that doesn't want to come up on stage? I will let you help from your seat. I promise I won't bring you up on stage. And I let them help from their seat, because they may want to participate but not want to come up on stage, or they may have an ability issue where they are in a wheelchair or cannot get on stage but want to participate. So I have multiple interactions like that, or places where objects get tossed around the audience and people can participate without coming up on stage.
Yes.
The start of my show is several minutes of stand-up comedy to get the audience used to my voice, to who I am, to what this is all about, to allow them a moment to finish their conversations, right? To finish their drinks.
To encourage them to like you.
To encourage them to like me, right? So they want to play, and they know that this is not a situation of, I am the great and powerful mind, and I will destroy you, I will burn you, I will crush you, I will, all these, I will kill you.
You can't do that.
Right.
No, you can't do that. You're too soft and pleasant.
Right.
But yes, there are people who are like that.
Right.
And I wonder how they ever get work.
Right. They don't get repeat bookings.
How do you tighten your routine?
Tightening routines is a constant struggle, because there is so much we want to say, and then we need to cut.
Yes.
There was a great scene in the movie A River Runs Through It, which was shot in Missoula, Montana, one of the most beautiful places in the world. And the son comes to the father with his essay, and the father says, good, now half as much. And the son goes back, cuts it down. Father looks at it, good, now half as much. Son goes back, writes it, father looks at it, says, good, you can go out and play now. And I think that that's very important. First, we need to write our scripts. I mean, how many people say, gee, I just say the things I've always said, I'm not going to write it, I just know what I do, I just improv. I remember I was at a convention with a very famous magician. This is a magician all of us have learned from, all of us have bought from. He is beloved in our art. And he said in front of the audience, I don't script any of my routines. I want everything to be natural, impromptu, and off the cuff. And I turned to him and said, that's strange, because I saw you perform this at Caesar's Magical Empire 20 years ago, and you did it almost word for word. And if that's not a script, I don't know what one is.
All right. So a script does not necessarily mean sitting down, skull sweat, writing.
Right.
It means polishing material that you've developed, that you've heard, that's a cute line, I want to put it in, and then having the intestinal fortitude to cut much of it out.
For me, I have to physically write it. And I cut pieces out and I add pieces in. Mm-hmm. And every night after every show, if there are moments that the audience said something funny or said something fun, or I can pull from a recording, or I remember something happening, I add it in. If they laughed at something last night, how can I make that happen tonight?
Yes.
How can the audience write my best jokes. I ask advice from everyone. I've worked with magicians who have said to me, Paul, I don't want any notes from anybody. I've worked with magicians who say, I can only take one note per day. That's it. No, I want notes from everybody. And even if their notes are wrong, even if I disagree with their notes,
they will validate what you know to be right.
I still want to hear the notes.
Yes.
I still want the feedback so that I can grow and build. I hire people like Gabe Abelson, who was a monologue writer for The Tonight Show,
Yes.
to write jokes for me. I hire people like Jeff McBride to help me find better methods to the effects that I'm doing. I hire people like Bob Fitch to help me with the theatricality. I used to hire Joni Spina to help me with music and movement. We need to find the experts in our art and pay that $100 to have them help us. It's not a lot of money.
Oh, Charlie Reynolds may have asked a bit more.
Right, Charlie Reynolds.
But I miss him. I mean, he was behind Mark Salem, for example. Before that, Doug Henning. Before that, I mean,
in New York, a brilliant guy. Yeah.
Yeah, just superb. And I just felt I had to mention him because
he's in that category.
He was a mensch. None of us is perfect. Tell us about the failure that taught you the most.
None of us is perfect. Talk about the failure that taught you the most. Boy, that's hard. Gotta think. So many failures. I mean, that's what.
Yeah, pick one.
Yeah, I mean, life is a series of failures.
In fact, you don't learn if you don't fail.
Right. Yeah. We have to allow ourselves to fail continuously, and to become good at failing, in order to succeed.
Yes.
Trying to be booked at Monday Night Magic. Boy, I failed a lot at Magic. At the Magic Castle. Boy, I failed a lot. Performing on stage. Here was a failure. That I was in college. I was an undergraduate, and I applied to perform in a talent show, and I had never worked with a wired mic before, and they gave me a wired mic, and they, instead of bringing my own table, I used their table, and the stage crew moved it up behind me when I started speaking, so when I took a step back, everything fell on the floor, and I had taken this wired microphone and put it in my jacket pocket, and when I walked off stage, it pulled me back on because I forgot that I was wired, and I mean, every show, there are mistakes and there are failures. I recently, we have to keep up with language as language changes. There was a girl in an audience just last week that had a word on her shirt that to my generation meant something very different than it means to this generation. Mm-hmm. And so when I uttered the name on her shirt, it received quite a
mixed response
from the audience, right? And so every day there are failures that we have to grow from, and finding pleasure in the opportunity to change and grow. We must, as stage performers, performing in front of live audiences, we must adopt a passion for change, for being pro-change, pro-innovation, and taking notes and developing the self. If this art is merely therapy and we just are doing it so that we can receive love from the other, it's going to be a much harder road.
It's a good start. Let's move on from there.
Right, sure.
Yeah, don't just settle. I think
Right.
that's what you're saying.
For sure.
And embrace the screw ups.
Right.
Because that's where you really learn.
That's where you really learn.
Those are the ones you remember. Yeah. What is the one thing every mentalist should not just know but put into practice?
What should every mentalist know? I remember the first time I met with Max Maven. Mm-hmm. And I came up to him and I said, Max, my name is Paul Draper. He said, yes, I recognize the name. And I said, Max, can I just ask you one quick question? And he looked at me and said, just because you've bought my tapes and books does not mean that you have access to me. It doesn't mean we are friends. And I said, all right. May I ask you? May I ask you just one question? Proceed. And I said, what for a young budding medalist who one day wants to be you? What is your one piece of standard advice you give to everyone? And he said, read everything. And I said, read everything red, read everything blue, read everything old, read everything new. What do you mean, read everything? And he said, had I felt it required more words, I would have utilized them. You're a pest, go away. And that was my first live interaction with Max. Now, I've ribbed him about that in my Magic Magazine article and my mum cover. But I've ribbed him, and so here too. But I want to follow that up with the fact that he is absolutely right.
Yes.
As a mentalist, we need to be interested in and engaged in everything. If I'm someone who reads people's minds, then I should know things about them. I should know what a electrical engineer does versus a mechanical engineer. I should know about what's currently going on in the Ukraine. I should know about their culture, their heritage, their profession, the city they're from. I should be interested and engaged. And if they're from somewhere or work in something that I don't know, I should be passionately interested in that. Because if I am a person whose core skill is that I know people, I read people's body language, I read their minds, I predict their actions, then that means I am engaged, fascinated, and interested in them, not only on stage but off, all the time. And as an individual who is an anthropologist and a rhetorician, that is my passion for real, both academically and professionally in this world, but it should be yours as well.
I think I also get a hint because you work a lot of corporate stuff, and working corporate doesn't mean do the show and leave.
No.
There is so much other, and that I think is where also the conversation boosts. You want to talk about that?
Absolutely. When we're working but it's true in other industries too. I mean, if you want to work county fairs, people that throw county fairs, they want to book people that they want to hang out with and spend time with, right? They're not just booking you to do a show. When you book a historic theater, I work a lot of historic theaters because I think they're beautiful. The people that refurbish and build these theaters, they want you to come and have dinner with them and their family and hear about your journeys and adventures. They want you to be the roving bard from your Dungeons and Dragons game come to life, right?
Yes.
They want the experience of the famous person who has come to their town, who is their friend and will regale them with story and song. And certainly in the corporate world, they have a lot of money. And they have a lot of options, and they don't need you, and they don't need me. And so they want to book someone that is their friend, that adds value to their life, who adds value to their work. They don't just want a show. They want someone who adds actual demonstratable tools and value that they can take back to the office that increases their bottom line and their experience. And if we're not adding that value personally, professionally, in every way, giving them thank you cards, sending them gifts, checking in with them about their family and caring about them as an individual, well, they're going to book someone else.
Yes. I often refer to that value thing as the takeaway.
Their takeaway, sure.
Why do they bother keeping their butts in the seats for the rest of the show if there's not going to be anything to bring home, a nugget of knowledge, a bit of inspiration?
Right. Last month I performed for IEEE, which is the largest engineering organization in the world. And this was the group of micro-mechanical engineers. So these are the people that are creating the bumblebees with super cameras in them to spy on everyone, right?
Yes.
And something this big that has more tech in it than the original moon landing, right?
Yes.
These are genius individuals from all over the world, and there were 700 of them that came together at the Rio here in Las Vegas. And I performed my show for them, and I of the 700, 2 of them got up and left. Oh, It hurt my soul to watch. Now, I don't know. One of them may have had a flood at home. One of them may have gotten a call for an emergency. One may have had to go to the restroom. But 2 of the 700 left, and I walked off stage, and I was so frustrated that I lost 2 members of the audience. And the chair of the organization came up to me, a fellow from India, who teaches at Berkeley, and he said, "It was amazing, Paul. You kept everyone." And I said, no, two people got up and left. He said, "No, the performer last year, we had 400 people get up and leave. By the end of the show, there were only 200 people in the audience. You kept everyone. It was amazing."
That's pretty hard to dispute. Well, and again, I think it may have been because those other performers were more about themselves,
Right.
than they were about actually enlightening or entertaining their audience.
Right.
Yes,
Of course.
What's your perfect audience? I mean, who is just built for Paul Draper?
I have 2 audiences that are my core audience, because I become a different person for these two primary audiences.
Let me just stop right there. Are you a different person, or do you simply show different aspects of your own personality?
Sure. I show either who I was when I was young, growing up in a small cattle town in Utah, versus who I am now.
So you retain your authenticity.
Right.
Okay, continue.
I appreciate that delineation. So my 2 audiences, number 1, are who I call the doctors, the lawyers, the chiefs, right? And I don't just mean Native American chiefs, though they're included, but I mean chief executive officers within organizations.
Sure.
An appropriated term, chief, right?
Yes.
That we use for all of our C-suites in corporate world.
Yes.
But that individuals who are highly educated, successful, people who understand that their life engaging with other human beings is core to their personal success. Because if someone feels that their life is about people, then a show that's all about people is powerful and meaningful to them. If someone whose life is all about working an assembly line, and they listen to their iPod or music the full time, and they're not interested in engaging with people, my show is not dream fulfillment for them. Yes. A magic show is better dream fulfillment for them.
More eye candy.
Right. Yeah. It fulfills their needs. If they want someone who's doing the Miser's dream, who's producing money on stage, because that's their dream. Somebody whose dream is to be a master of the social world, they enjoy my show. Okay. Now, the other group that enjoys my show is because of my background. Small town America. I grew up, in a little teeny town. I was raised by my grandma who was born in a town of 70 people, right? This is my origin. This is my roots, right? And I slow down my speech. When I'm performing in New York City, my opening lines are, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Draper. It's so wonderful to perform for you tonight," right? When I'm performing in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, suddenly it's, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Draper." There's a different cadence to the experience. And when I'm performing in South Dakota in the Crystal Theater, I'm going to spend a lot more time talking about my experience in the cattle world, right? And than I will if I'm performing off Broadway in New York.
You're building a connection once again. You're seeking similarities.
Right. And so the small town mayor, police chief, head of the local Pepsi bottling company in Butte, Montana, right? They're still the leaders of their community, but instead of on a national scale, they're on a local scale. So those are my 2 major audiences.
All right. How do you add visuals without packing visuals?
Right. how do we make a mentalism show visual?
Yes.
So these are the tools I have. I have my body, my facial expressions, my costumes, the costume changes I can make, taking off a jacket, putting on a jacket, taking off a tie. I usually have, like I said, a set that is built from things that the average convention center has.
Sure.
These are some visuals. We have the opportunity to make visuals that are light. The paper is light, and we don't have to just produce pieces of paper this big. We can produce pieces of paper that are this big.
Sure.
Audience members are visuals, and the stage pictures that we create with them. We don't have to just have me and one audience member, me and two audience members. There are V's, there are pictures. We can have groups of audience on stage. I often, if I'm performing at colleges, like to have committees on stage with me, because mentalism has the benefit of being able to be performed surrounded.
Pretty much.
In my last newsletter, I talked about something I send out to every client, which is that I need to be the tallest, the loudest, the brightest, and have the best introduction. So the tallest and the biggest. I need to be the tallest, be on a stage. The brightest, have stage lighting. The loudest, have a microphone.
Yes.
The biggest, put me on a screen with a video camera and make the me on the screen bigger than the me on stage.
Yes.
Because sometimes the me on the screen is smaller than the me on stage. Then why do we have a screen?
Yes.
And I need the best introduction. I need an introduction from a respected member of the community. And if I'm given those things, that's a visual picture that helps everything that I'm doing. There are ways to go to any copy store and create all sorts of visuals, backdrops, pull-up screens, things that are light and inexpensive to carry with us. But the visual elements of the theater and being in the audience, on the stage, off to the side, up in the air.
Never a static picture.
Never a static picture, that the stage should be a playground within which we are experiencing the show. There should be moments we sit on the stairs, that we walk into the audience, that we stand, that we sit, that we jump up and down. There should be different visual elements for every segment of the show.
Do you play with your audience?
You know, I do. I think that the live theater is about play, and it's about immersive theater, and it's about improvisational theater with sometimes unskilled partners. But taking classes in improv makes all the difference in the world. The yes and experience, saying yes and the excitement of finding something new and something more and building and growing. If the stage show is not a place of play, if it's not a place of joy, then we should just record it and send the videotape.
Just don't go there.
Don't go. When you watch a Broadway production, I talked to Tobias Beckwith, who's Jeff McBride's manager and has done some work for me, and he was the production manager on Sweeney Todd on Broadway. And he said the wonderful thing about watching Carew and Angela Lansbury is that the show was different every night, and that there were new experiences and new discoveries made every show in hundreds of performances.
And these were pros who could make tiny adjustments without getting SAG or what's the stage actors?
Right, equity.
Yeah, without getting equity on their case.
Right.
Because there's nothing a director wants to hear less than changing a line.
That's right.
Unless you're Angela Lansbury.
I once had a director say to me, a very famous director say to me, "Paul, do you have a Pulitzer?" And I, no. He said, Sondheim has a Pulitzer. When you have a Pulitzer, you can change his lines.
Oh my! That's a very gentle way of putting it, isn't it?
And when I was in Phantom, some of the lighting cues were based on the notes we hit. So if we didn't hit the right note, the computer didn't change the lighting cue.
You mean you didn't have a guy on the board?
No, there was a guy watching the board, but the lighting cues were set to the notes we hit, so it had to be very specific. Right?
I have to ask, what part did you play?
I had a very small role of the stage manager.
Yes.
It was, good missus, it wasn't me. I was not in my post. It must have been a ghost.
Yes. What a great show
An
that
understudy for the managers.
Okay, and still is that. I recall that great scene. I have a letter. Let's just get back to mentalism, because otherwise we're going to bore our audience to death. Let's see. This is a question that was asked of me on my Facebook page. Please discuss framing impossible results as being simply the outcome of something that the mentalist does versus evoking something that can happen when the audience works together as a cooperative effort.
Complex question. Impossible results. So these are two different causes to the effect. So like I said earlier, all of magic and mentalism is, to me, cause and effect reality. What is the cause? What is the effect? Waving a wand is the cause. The ball vanishes is the effect. The mentalist looks like he's constipated. He gets the word out. That's the effect, right? So the question is the effect is an amazing outcome.
Yes.
The cause is the causal reality. The mentalist having great ability, or the audience coming together and them having great ability.
And which would you choose?
And which would I choose? And the answer is I would choose different things at different times. My character and my personal life is I am a teacher, right? And a big instructor, a professor, right? A big part of my show is saying we all have these abilities. We all are incredible people. The more we open up our hearts and our empathy to others and see them as who they are rather than who we project them to be, the better we are as mind readers, right? And so there are segments of the show built in where I have the audience work together to help me succeed on stage.
Yes.
And there are effects that have multiple ways of going. If the audience happens to get it right, then it looks like that was the expected effect.
Yes.
If the audience gets it wrong, then I can admonish them, have a teaching moment, and then set it right.
Yes.
And so for me, it's desperately important to have both experiences within my theatrical performances. I'm being hired to come there to be the expert and the one who does it. And I try, most of the things in my show, for various reasons, are things that I can do without the trick if I need to. That is because of that, I don't do a lot of future prediction because I can't actually do that. But there are lots of times in my career where, because I open with a piece of psychometry, I have then had clients come to me and say, all right, the 5 of us from the treasury team each have envelopes and your check is in one of them. Find it.
Oi.
And then what do? You find it. That's right, you find it. You use muscle reading, you read their body language, you do it for real.
Yes.
I had one time on the Hallmark Channel, live television. I was the star of a Christmas special, or not Christmas. I did a Christmas special too, but I was the star of a Halloween special. And they told me that I wasn't going to do psychometry, that we didn't have time. And it's a live show. This was a live Halloween special. And they came to me during the break and said, okay, we gathered up objects from 5 of the people. We need you to do it as our ending segment. What? Right? And so these 5 objects are here. They're in a box being held by a PA, and they're dumped out on the table, and I have to figure out which object goes to which person. And you can go on YouTube and you can search Psychometry Hallmark Paul Draper. that clip is there, and I am shaking. I am shaking. I am sweating. And at the end, where normally I am happy and bursting with joy on Hallmark, I look scared and uncomfortable. But
it was a good schwitz.
But I successfully did it.
Yes.
And and there are ways I did it and things that I used. But it's very important to me that we do things, at least some things in our show, that are based in reality and are transferable skills that we can transfer to the audience to give them superpowers.
Such as intuition, for
Right.
example, which is real. So when you talk about it, when the audience reads you, they will not perceive any lying coming their way.
Right.
You're speaking truth.
Right.
And to what degree do you use applied psychology in your program?
It's a good question. I do not personally use a lot of psychology. There are a lot of mentalists who do, though I'm sure
Not
there is.
overtly necessarily.
Not overtly. My interest, again, my bachelor's degrees in anthropology, master's degrees was in political rhetoric. My PhD work was in performance studies. But I am particularly interested in deceptive communication, rhetoric, interpersonal communication research, cognitive anthropology, decision making based on cognition, why we believe weird things, right? Like Michael Shermer's book. So I pull, though those areas all pull, of course, from psychology, but my intellectual tradition comes more out of rhetoric and anthropology than it does from psychology. And the answer is I use it a lot.
For example, B.F. Skinner, Psychology 101.
Sure.
Behavior that is rewarded will be repeated.
Right.
So therefore, as we engage our early participants,
Right.
if we treat them well, that's why we get more of them willing
I guess
to come forward.
I'm interested in educational psychology. If there's any area of psychology that I utilize in my show, it's multiple talents in educational psychology and how we transition at different ages and where we get emotionally stuck in places. And so I do use some of that in summing up people and working with people. And I use a lot of theater, a lot of theatrical research on how to engage a person in a show. I'm also deeply passionate about mythology. Joseph Campbell had an enormous impact on my life, and here's a man with a master's in mythology who PhDs all over the world just adore and change the way we think about storytelling.
Right. If mentalism as an entertainment product were to change for the better, what change would you suggest?
We didn't go through any of these
The
questions.
questions get harder
I
as
didn't
we
have
go
time to
along.
prep. Let's see, are we almost out of time?
Almost.
Here's a problem we're going to be facing as mentalists, and we're facing now, and it's going to increase. Technology can do what we do. It can do what we do. My cell phone can talk to people across the world, can bring up any information on anybody, can research people. People have their lives online. If you would have told a mentalist 50 years ago that the government knew everything about you, pictures of you as a baby, who your friends were, where you were going for lunch, what you like to eat, that would say, oh, that'd be horrific for that to exist. But that today people give away all that information freely everywhere, every day, everywhere they go, without thinking about it.
Yes. We can thank God our government is inept and can't use it.
Right, and so it's there are some people who now wear glasses that can pull up information. And if they see other people who also have this app turned on, they can turn and look at them, know that person's birthday, their favorite color, their favorite food, who their friends are, whether they're married or not, who their spouse is, all of the things that are normally core to a mentalism show, these things are being done immediately. The idea of using a pad of paper with a pen that sends me information, well, 10 years ago, that was in every magazine on every airplane.
So how do we get past that? How do we entertain our audience without them automatically leading themselves to technology? It's got to be technology.
We are going to have to continue to be interested in the experience of people. We have to continue to be interested in interpersonal communication, intercultural communication, like you said, applied psychology, human relationships. Because as the world becomes more and more defined by technology, we have to be less interested in the knowable things and more interested in the heart and in the moment and what's going on right now, this second, not divining this person's mother's name, but instead divining what they are hungry for right now in their mind, heart, spirit, and soul. And a mentalist is an individual who should be passionately interested in another person's needs, wants, fears, desires. And our show, like a comedian show, is about releasing the joy of shared experience. A mentalism show is about fantasy fulfillment, of having greater connection as a member of a tribe, of having someone who truly knows you in a way that you wish other people did, and connecting with the performer and the audience, and audience members connecting with each other in a way that reminds us of what it is to be human.
How do you want to be perceived tomorrow, the next day, after you're gone? How do you want Paul Draper to be remembered?
I am not yet at an age that I have started thinking towards or building legacy. I have learned a great deal from individuals who have passed on, like Louis Simonoff, who was a mentor to Paul Harris and Lee Asher and Alan Ackerman, from Bert Sperber, who wrote Miracles of My Friends, worked with the elders, from Eugene Berger, who recently passed, and these are men of great legacy. I am currently 39 years old as of just a few days ago, and am not at that stage, though my dear mother died at 55 and my grandfather at 60, so maybe I should care about that at this point, because there aren't many old fat Jews. But my short answer is this: currently, my 5 core needs. There used to be 3, then there were 4, now there were 5. They grow, but that I make all decisions based on. I want to educate others. I want to entertain others. I want to make enough money that I am not in want, not rich. I have no desire to be a wealthy man, yada, 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 right? I want to, that's a Fiddler on the Roof reference. I want to do things my grandmother would have found respectable. And I want to build healthy relationships with people, not take advantage of people, hurt people, that. So all of my decisions, should I take this role, should I do this, should I do that, am I educating people, am I entertaining people, am I making enough money, am I doing things my grandmother would find respectable, am I building healthy relationships? It needs to have at least 3 of those, or I'm not going to do it. So I guess from that, how I want to be remembered is as an intelligent, entertaining, successful, respectable person who was kind and worth being friends with.
I would have gone a little shorter, and I would have said Paul Draper, he's a mentalist, he's a mentor, and he's a mensch.
Yeah, good Yiddish word.
Thank you very much,
thank
Paul.
you.
It has been a pleasure getting to know you better.
Oh, great to be with you. Thank you.